Let's bring in Mark Polymeropoulos, former CIA senior intelligence officer and MSNBC national security intelligence analyst, and Ray Takei, former senior advisor on Iran at the State Department and senior fellow for Middle East Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations. Gentlemen, thank you both. Ray, you first. I'm curious your reaction to this development and the Secretary of State saying this was Iran's choice.
Well, what he's trying to suggest is that the president had offered Iran an opportunity to negotiate. There was even a couple of proposals exchanged. All those proposals involved proscribing domestic enrichment, essentially abolishing domestic enrichment, and they proved unacceptable to the Iranian regime. So in that sense, the Secretary of State is correct in saying that there was a diplomatic path and an offer made, but that offer was rejected, and the president proceeded with an alternative course of action, as we have seen.
So, Mark, an Iranian retaliation, it can take many forms, one of which could be, say, a cyber attack. How prepared is the U.S. for one of those? And how great is the threat of Iran activating sleeper cells that may be here in the U.S. or abroad?
Well, the intelligence community is going to be certainly very focused on this, both, domestically. This is the Joint Terrorism Task Forces within the United States. This is led by the FBI and, of course, working with our foreign liaison partners. Iran has a very sophisticated and longstanding terrorist apparatus. It could be activated, and so we're really going to be on high alert to detect, deter, and disrupt any type of attacks. And this is what the intelligence community, the counterterrorism world, is pretty good at. On cyber, it's, I think that, the U.S. remains vulnerable in terms of attacks on infrastructure, on transportation networks, and the Iranians have a fairly solid cyber apparatus. And so, all these possibilities are on the table. And I think what the intelligence community is going to do, and has done already, is provide kind of the range of assessments to the administration on what Iran could do. The big question, of course, that you've alluded to over the last couple hours is, what will Iran decide? Because Secretary of State Rubio, President Trump, and others have made it quite clear that any type of retaliation, particularly, I think, if it leads to American deaths, will be met with overwhelming force. But I think we would be remiss not to be quite concerned right now. And, and it's just, by the way, it's not the next just days and week ahead. Retaliation could take place in the form of months or even a year plus, particularly terrorist attacks against U.S. interests abroad. So there's a lot of work to do for the intelligence community.
As has been said, Iran has a long memory. But let me ask you, to what extent are they right now capable of achieving any of these kinds of attacks? And then what, should they do one, do you believe the U.S. response would be, Mark?
So that's a great question, because there's a lot that's gone on inside Iran in terms of Israeli decapitation strikes against senior military and intelligence officials. There is obviously a pervasive fear that's going on within the Iranian security apparatus, because it's clear that Israeli intelligence has Iran penetrated in ways that I think has surprised a lot of us. So there is a question on capabilities right now. Can there actually be communications between Tehran and overseas sleeper cells, for example? We just don't know that. You have to assume that they can. But I think if something doesn't happen, it might be because things are so absolutely degraded. And again, I think one of the things that's going to decide any possible U.S. response is frankly, casualties on the U.S. side. I know that sounds very grim, but if Iran does something that's relatively symbolic, that does not lead to U.S. casualties, perhaps that would be it. But if Americans die, I think President Trump is going to be under a lot of pressure to hit back, and hit back quite strongly.
Ray, talk to me about how damaging this war with Israel and now the U.S. strikes have been to the Iranian supreme leader, because you say he's been, quote, comprehensively humbled. So what will his priorities be right now? And could there be an internal threat to his leadership in the wake of all this?
Well, he has been comprehensively humbled. He had a strategy that prior to October 2023 looked like very successful. He had rings of fire around Israel and what seemed to be quite capable of proxies. They're gone. The collapse of the Assad regime in Syria has been quite detrimental to Iran, because that was his land bridge to the Mediterranean. That's gone. The one thing he had was a nuclear program, and nuclear infrastructure, which was elaborate and sophisticated. That's been damaged. It's been degraded. To what extent, nobody knows. Today, he's not very supreme. And I think the challenge to his rule that is often neglected can more immediately come from the right, the members of the security services, the members of the Revolutionary Guards, and others who are essentially suffering from the cascade of his misjudgments, and particularly for him not to have developed a nuclear weapon before all this. Everybody knows now in Iran, if they had the bomb, they wouldn't be getting bombed. So he will challenge, he would get challenged essentially very severely from the left. From the right, in the larger sense, he has a challenge with the population as well. But there's a lot of serious problems about his authority. He is significantly diminished, and his authority is significantly eroded within the system and within the country.
But Ray, if the challenges come from the right, could that create further problems for the United States?
Well, that's right, because among the challenges that he'll have, among the petitions that the right will make, is for Iran to develop a clandestine nuclear program and march to the bomb with some degree of alacrity. Whether they can do that or not remains to be seen, because, as was mentioned, Iran is heavily penetrated, its intelligence apparatus is penetrated, so they have to do a vast counterintelligence scrub to begin with, and whether they can actually have enough confidence in their personnel and their system to proceed with a provocative program like that remains to be seen. One thing coming out of this crisis, I don't think Iran will have an elaborate civilian nuclear infrastructure anymore, because that was essentially their pathway before. They were going to have a big nuclear program. Some of it, lots of it, was declared, and maybe that would give them the sneak out option. Right now, the nuclear program is likely to go into the dark, and Iran is likely to lessen, if not completely sever, its relationship with the IAEA. There's a lot of criticism in Iran today of the International Atomic Energy Agency, and particularly its director, Rafael Grossi, for putting Iran in a position that they are today.
Okay, Ray Takei and Mark Polymeropoulos, gentlemen, thank you so much.